Hey guys, it's Kevin again. Before I start this video with 22TigerDude for our review of An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn, just wanted to give you guys a heads up, knowing that this video was actually made over 2 months ago, so if you're wondering why the background changes or something like that, that is the reason why. I have had the ability to edit this video for a while, but unfortunately I've just had a lot of reviews on my plate lately that have just overshadowed this video, but knowing the year is very quickly dwindling down, I knew I had to get this video out very soon, also because I'm probably going to get my worst list out tomorrow, and there's no way that I can get that worst list out without having this on there in some sort of capacity. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but again, just so you guys know, it was filmed over 2 months ago, and yeah, anyways, enjoy the review. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be our review for An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn.
Oh, yes.
And, well, I guess we'll just get into the plot of this movie. Essentially, this film, it focuses on this couple named Linda Darling and her husband, whose name I can't remember right now. But basically, they are in a very sort of contentious relationship. And when Linda sees an ad on TV for her former lover named Beverly Luff Linn, basically she he's going to be hosting this thing where like you can he's going to host this like entertainment thing for like one night, and basically from there she decides that she's going to track him down, and that's really all there is to say. Now, guys, I think it's suffice to say, considering that I had Tony on for the Greasy Strangler review, we were both absolutely dreading this film. This, for me, was my least anticipated of the entire year. The second that I heard that the directors had another film, that Jim Hosking, whatever his name is, had another... Jim Hosking had another movie coming out, and it was coming out this year, I automatically was dreading it. But let's just turn to Tony here. What were your expectations going into this film?
Oh, going into this film, man, I was hyped. Like, I saw a trailer going, this is going to be the best movie ever. This is going to revolutionize cinema. This is going to change my life. And I am bullshitting when I say that. I was absolutely dreading this movie because, similar to Kevin, I too think The Greasy Strangler is one of the worst movies ever. And not only did I have the pleasure of reviewing it here with this fella, but I even did my own solo rant on my own channel. So if you want to see me lose my mind, yeah, go watch that rant. That really shows you how strong the hatred is for that film. But even though I was dreading this film, I did go in with an open mind, just hoping it would not be on the level of Greasy Strangler. I would hope it would be maybe at least be an okay movie. Like, honestly, considering how low in quality Greasy Strangler was, in my opinion, of course, at this point, I was hoping Beverly Luff Linn was okay. And I just want to say thank you very much, Kevin, for bringing you on. So I guess before I say any more, Kevin.
Yeah, so like I said, was absolutely dreading it. Greasy Strangler is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's just such a disgusting, vile, unnecessarily violent film that really I wouldn't want anyone to have the misfortune of watching. But going into this film, like I said, I was absolutely dreading it. Even though the trailers now look as god-awful as The Greasy Strangler, it still was not a film that I really could go into with that open mind just because of what Jim Hosking did. And I will say right off the bat, is this film as terrible as A Greasy Strangler? No. That being said, it's still fucking awful. This is still a really bad movie that is a little bit more story-driven, but it still is very annoying and weird, and there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. But we're going to turn to Tony and hear his thoughts of the film before we get more in-depth with it.
All right, so I saw Beverly Luff Linn, And like I said just now, I was hoping it would be at least an okay movie. And it's less than that. I agree with Kevin. It's not a level of Greasy Strangler. That's definitely a positive. I could just say straight off the bat, it is not Greasy Strangler bad. It is not one of the worst movies I've seen or anything. But that being said, it is still a really bad movie. It is still one of the worst movies I've seen from 2018. And yeah, I'll give the spotlight to you now, Kevin.
Yeah, so the thing I will say right off the bat, the thing I do think that makes this movie just a teeny bit better, and I say teeny, but it's actually a lot better than The Greasy Strangler, is the acting, which I think you will agree with me. Tell me, some of the acting is better here. Some of the acting, the thing I will give this film is that Jim Hoskins is actually working with actors that I respect, with actors that I actually do enjoy in their previous efforts. It's not just a bunch of random people I've never heard of before, even though Elizabeth Durazo apparently did stuff that I had seen. I just didn't recognize her for some reason. That being said, I don't think the acting here is as god-awful as it was in his previous iteration, especially when it comes to Aubrey Plaza. I actually did think Aubrey Plaza was well casted here. I liked her as the character of Lulu Danger. I think she did do a good job in this film. Sure, she's doing the typical, sarcastic Aubrey Plaza thing, but I do think it worked here for the most part in tone what was going on. Her character is a bit of a different story. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I do think she did an all right job here. What do you want to say about her real quick?
In my opinion, I think she's fine. I'm not the biggest Aubrey Plaza fan. She hasn't really impressed me other than Ingrid Goes West. I didn't care for that movie, but I'll admit that was like the first time I literally looked at her and went, wow, she can really deliver such a strong performance. But that's really the only time she's impressed me. This one, like, there's a couple of scenes where I felt she was attempting to give a good performance, but unfortunately it came up as flat for me. But, for me, she's doing her usual thing. Nothing about it seems all that different from a lot of her performances, in my opinion. So for me, she's just whatever.
Yeah, I think compared to the other performances, though, what saying someone is whatever is actually good for a Jim Hosking movie. So I will definitely give it that. For me, though, I do think the standout here is Jemaine Clement. I actually do think he did a pretty good job in this film. Him and Plaza do work well together, but I think that's more due to them being in Legion Season 2 together, knowing the scenes they had in that show. It did translate pretty well here, even though, once again, his character is not very well written. He is still very charismatic and fun, and I think he definitely was kind of the, he really was one of the brighter spots in the film for sure, and I did think he actually did a pretty good job here.
Yeah, I actually have to agree with Kevin here. I also think Jemaine Clement is the best actor in this movie. I thought he did a really good job. He did a very impressive job of just bringing some charisma to his character. Even though his character, I mean, to be fair, these characters aren't like the best written, but as far as like a performance, what he had to do, I'm not gonna lie, I had some fun watching him because he had a nice presence to him, if that makes any sense. I just thought he brought such a good presence to the screen. So yeah, I thought he did a really good job for the material he was given.
Yeah, as far as the rest of the cast goes, forget about it. All of them are pretty bad here. Emile Hirsch is just really hamming it up here, and not in a way that's like fun and entertaining, in a way that's like really annoying. Every single line he's like shouting it in this voice, and it's really annoying and hard to listen to. Immediately you're turned off by this character. The second he came on screen, I knew it was going to be bad, and I've never really liked Emile Hirsch that much as an actor, but this really did not work for me at all. I thought that the other actors here, especially we'll get to them a little bit later, but I do want to zero in on Craig Robinson real quick, who, if you guys notice, we were actually making fun of him in the beginning of this review because of the fact that throughout most of the movie, Craig Robinson is just groaning and moaning throughout most of the film, except for a little bit later on. He does have a few talking scenes in this movie, and I will admit, in those talking scenes, he is pretty good. When he's grunting, on the other hand, it's the worst thing ever. It is the worst work I have ever seen from him. It's just it just seemed like he was trying so hard to be over the top and absurd. And I'm sorry, it just Craig Robinson did not work in this role for me. I did think that he was a bit miscasted in that sense, and I just really was not a fan of him. But again, compared to some of the other actors in this movie, I will give him that. He's not the worst thing ever, except when he's just the whole movie. Then it's like very...
Or when he farts a few times.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later. But easily the worst offense of this entire film. I don't know who this actor is. I don't know what his name is, but this Indian guy that keeps showing up in the movie. If you guys remember, this is the guy who's infamous for that amazing potato chip scene, the Greasy Strangler, that totally didn't make us want to fucking just slit our wrists right then and there with a fucking potato chip. It definitely did not make us want to do that. But this guy, he comes back and... oh my God, he really was testing my patience here. I mean, there are legitimate scenes in this movie where I really think they were trying to torture me. They knew that we do not like this character, and he keeps being like, I'm back, I know you missed me, but I'm back now, here I am, I'm back now. And it's like, get the fuck off the screen. Like, this guy, he serves no purpose in this movie whatsoever. Most of the film, he's just shouting for this clerk to, like, give him his money or whatever. Just a really annoying character overall. This guy cannot act for the life of him, and I really was not a fan. What do you want to say about this poor Indian dude?
Well, as far as Emile Hirsch, I agree that he was not good in this one. Craig Robinson, aside from when he does actually have dialogue later on, yeah, it disappoints me to say it because I'm a big Craig Robinson fan, but he was terrible most of the time when he had to do grunting. And I know that's not his fault. That's what the script told him to do. But unfortunately, the way he had to translate that script, it just fell so flat. And it was honestly painful to watch it. But when he talked, it was actually a breath of fresh air. And as for the Indian guy, which the actor, I don't know his name, like Kevin already said, he was also in The Greasy Strangler. And yeah, I was really annoyed. The reason I laughed is because just seeing Kevin going, oh no, not this guy again. Like when he reacted every time he came on screen, I laughed at that. But in reality, he actually did get on my nerves too. And it's like the fact that all he does in the movie is like just shout about his money and threatening and saying how he'll come back every day. It's like, it's just the same thing. It comes up as so repetitive. And that's my problem with this movie. A lot of things are just so annoying. It's either annoying, repetitive, or it's just really boring.
Oh, yeah. So, and then there are some other actors from The Greasy Strangler. Thankfully, Michael St. Michaels does not show up. We kept waiting for Michael St. Michaels to show up. He does not show up in this movie, thankfully. Skylar Elobar has a very, very small role in this film, and Elizabeth Durazo is not anywhere in sight, so I will give the film that. The acting is a bit better, but it's still not anything that great. But considering what we got before, I do think it is a bit of an improvement. In terms of the directing, though, this is where we get to the red flags here, because once again, Jim Hosking, he just does not know how to direct a movie. I mean, this film, the tone is so all over the place. I could not tell what he wanted to do with this film. I will say, he does scale back on the grotesque humor. Thank God he does scale back on that, but it is still very absurd, very weird, and it's very hard to tell what he's trying to do. There are moments in this movie where it seems like they're actually trying to be sincere, and it seems like they're trying to come from a place where they're actually trying to make us feel bad for these characters. And I'm like, okay, I like where this is going, and then he'll just immediately revert back to this really dumb comedy, and I just couldn't tell what he was really trying to do in terms of the tone here, and his direction overall, it just feels very confusing. It's like he wanted to make the worst movie ever in The Greasy Strangler, and he accomplished that. And he thought, okay, how do I make something that's not as bad? And that's all he wanted to do. He wanted to make something that's not as bad, but for some reason, but he didn't know what else to do with the film after that. And it really does show here. I can't tell what he's trying to do in terms of his directing. Is he I mean, obviously, you don't make it that weird accidentally. It is purposely weird. I do understand that the movie is very purposeful in terms of its absurdity. The problem with me is that it doesn't feel consistent. It felt like there were points where the movie was trying to get a little bit smart and meta, and I'll get to that more with the writing. But it just didn't feel very consistent in that sense, and I think Tony here will very much agree with me on that.
Yeah, this movie is a mess. It's a big, jumbled mess. I agree with Kevin. The tone is very inconsistent. With the characters in terms of where the storyline is going from Jim Hosking's direction. It really is all over the place. And the editing too, oh my goodness, the editing in this movie is just so choppy. It abruptly cuts to so many scenes. Like there could be a weird moment happening and then abruptly cuts to something else. Like we go from an out of nowhere sex scene that lasts for like a good 10 seconds.
Oh yeah, I will get to that very soon.
And then it cuts to something else. So yeah, this movie is not very consistent, and I do get a certain style that Jim Hosking is going for. I'll say this: I think the cinematography is actually a little bit better compared to The Greasy Strangler. I'll definitely give the movie that cinematography. It does look a little bit more like it actually has a budget, so that's definitely a positive. But yeah, like I've already said, it's just such an inconsistent movie, and I get to what he's trying to go for, but it just doesn't come off as natural.
Yeah.
It comes off as so forced. And I can get into weird movies if they're done right, but like with Greasy Strangler, which definitely didn't work for me at all. And then now that we cut to this one, it just feels really forced. It's like he's trying so hard to be so weird and out there that it just completely takes me out of the movie, and I cannot get behind whatever weird style he has to throw at the screen.
Yeah, and on the subject of how inconsistent this movie is, let's just jump into the writing, which for me is the biggest, I think the most egregious error that this film does make. I mean, the screenplay is so all over the place here. Let's talk about Aubrey Plaza's character, for example, because there's a lot of ways I can talk about how all over the place this film is, but Aubrey Plaza, I think, is a big example of that. Because like I said, I don't think her acting is that bad here. Her character, though, is a fucking mess. I mean, she starts off this movie and she's crazy, and you're thinking, okay, you can understand, why, she's trying to get away from like Emile Hirsch or whatever, and she just seems like she's a little bit crazy. Then in the film, when she meets up with Jemaine Clement, that's where I'm like, okay, maybe they're trying to use her as like the rational one, the one who's like, wait, why are you saying this? Why are you saying all these weird things? Like Jemaine Clement, without getting into too much, he's a very weird character. There's a lot of weird, disgusting things he's done for sure. And Aubrey Plaza's reaction feels very natural. Then later in the film, she'll do something that's just as weird and weird and disgusting. And it's like, why are you going in this direction with her? Then suddenly she starts to have feelings for Jemaine Clement, and suddenly she doesn't. I mean, her character, I just could not tell where they were going with her. I don't understand who she really is in this movie, and that's a huge example of how inconsistent I think this film really is. Same with Jemaine Clement. I can't tell what they were trying to do with him. Yeah, he's very weird. There's a lot of stuff he's done that's like disgusting and things like that, but I just couldn't tell what they were trying to do with this character. Are we supposed to feel bad for him for the things he's done, for the fact that like he's not, are we supposed to root for him and Aubrey Plaza together? The film certainly makes it seem that way. I mean, I really couldn't tell what they were trying to do with these main two, and it wouldn't be a problem if they were the main focus of the movie. A lot of this movie is focusing on their romance, and that the film is trying to get us to root for them together, but a lot of the time it's like, this guy's a fucking creep. Like, why does she have any interest in him whatsoever? And at first I was happy that she didn't have interest in him, but suddenly she does, and I I really couldn't tell where they were trying to go with these characters. It just did not make a lot of sense to me, and I think that those two are very inconsistent. However, they're still not the most inconsistent. The most inconsistent character, without a doubt, is the eponymous Beverly Luff Linn. He is just so all over the place in this movie. You know, when he's not grunting or doing something weird like that, there's a point in the film, like I said, where he actually does start to speak, and you're thinking, okay, you know, he gives a valid reason as to why he doesn't speak as much. And you're like, okay, well, why couldn't you have done that? You know, why didn't you just speak? And then, like I said, they give you a logical reason, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. But then immediately they revert back to him doing the grunting thing again. And I just did not really understand that at all. There's a lot of characters in this movie that are written that way. And again, it just shows me that I don't think Jim Hosking is a guy that cares about character development. I don't think he's a guy that knows how to write characters. He knows how to create gags. He knows how to create really absurd moments, but he doesn't know how to do anything story-wise. And I think that very much does show when it comes to how these characters are written.
Yeah, pretty much everything you've said is exactly how I feel. That's why it's so hard for me to even get attached to Jemaine, Clement, and Aubrey Plaza's characters, because it's like what you said. You really said it perfectly. You don't know how to feel. Like, it's like Jim Hoskins, like, okay, we want you to feel bad for these characters. And then there's another point where, oh, you're not supposed to really care. So, you know, us as the audience, we're just so confused, and it's hard to get attached when it's all like, okay, which way do we go? I'm all about, you know, messing with the viewer's mind, but the way Jim Hosking does it, he does it in such a wrong fashion. Even the romance, like, at all. Reason I thought there was some good chemistry is because the actors look like, sure, they look like they were having fun.
Yeah.
And you said they were both in Legion, so it's clear that they're good friends at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But the script is just so poorly written, just how the quote-unquote development of the characters is so poorly written that I just did not care at all, honestly. And like what they tried to do with Beverly Luff Linn as well, like you already stated, that was poorly done too.
Yeah, so here's the thing. There are legitimate arcs in this movie that could work. The idea that this is someone that Lulu has known for a while, and she's trying to, you know, reunite with him, and we get more into their past, that would be great. But it takes forever to get there. A lot of this movie, there is a lot of padding here. I will say there is not as much padding as The Greasy Strangler, because that movie was virtually plotless. This film actually does have somewhat of a plot. It just takes a long time to get there. And there's a lot of stalling in this movie, specifically when it comes to any time we cut to Beverly Luff Linn. A lot of the scenes in this movie, they're just completely absurd. I mean, there's a whole scene where there are these two guys just saying immediately over and over again. And it goes on for maybe a solid 2 minutes. And I was really hoping that we were above that Jim Hosking wasn't going to do that in this movie. But then he has this scene where they just go immediately. It'd be like, Tony, let's reenact that scene right now. So they're sitting around and they're just going immediately.
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 It's annoying, you know? If you're getting annoyed, that's the point. It's a very annoying, out-of-nowhere sequence.
It's like a scene you can easily cut out of the movie, not to interrupt, but it's like a scene you can easily cut out in the editing room.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, to me, it's one of those things where it's like, sure, maybe it's funny if if you're the director and you're just trying to do something stupid, but it doesn't work in context of the film. I don't know why that's here. And like I said, at least with The Greasy Strangler, as awful and just as headache-inducing as it was, and I'd say even awful is an understatement, that film was consistent in terms of its very off-putting scenes, and this film's really not. It's having characters say immediately and shit like that, and I just didn't really understand that. Anytime we're cutting back to The Clerk, and it's like a completely different movie, there are these two guys as well that are, I guess, supposed to be like criminals or something like that we keep cutting back to in this car. Doesn't really lead to much of anything, and there's a lot of problems in that regard. There's a lot of scenes that, like I said, just come out of nowhere, and once we eventually get to the stuff with Lulu and Beverly Luff Linn. Like I said, at first it is compelling, but then you realize that there's like two other characters that are pining for Lulu. Everyone's after Lulu in this movie. You got Jemaine Clement, you got Emile Hirsch. They're all going after her. There's like this out of nowhere like fight scene or whatever. It's really dumb. There's a lot of scenes like that in here. And again, just to sum it up, because I'm really rambling here, the movie's just a mess in terms of writing. It really doesn't work at all. And it's definitely one of the biggest things this movie does wrong. But in terms of, like you said, though, in terms of cinematography, I do think this film does do a better job in kind of building the world. This film actually looks like it's a movie. It doesn't look like a fucking YouTube video. In fact, going back to the Greasy Strangler, just to shit on it for a little bit, because I love to do that. There's a scene in this movie where someone pulls out $1, and I was on Rabbit with Tony, Adam, and a couple other guys, and I'm like, see, guys, there's the budget of the movie right there. They saved the budget of the movie right there just for this scene. So yeah, I thought that was a little bit funny, but again, I think that they did a better job with the cinematography. It actually does look like a movie. You could tell they had a bigger budget, and they do a pretty good job with that. However, some of the cinematography is still really bad. Anytime there's like CGI or something like that used, it's very obvious. There are some things that just don't look good at all. Nothing too, some stuff is leaving my mind right now. But it's definitely not the best cinematography ever. But again, because of how terrible the Greasy Strangler looked, this is actually, somewhat impressive with how much better the cinematography would look. And the score, I will say, the score, while I don't like it, I don't like the score at all of this movie. It's very annoying and it's very repetitive. It's not nearly as repetitive as a Greasy Strangler. They actually did try to do different cues and things like that, and that's something I was overall happy to see. I was happy to see they are improving. It's not just bum 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 bum.
Not the same thing over and over again.
Not the same thing over and over again every scene. There actually is an improvement in terms of that. In fact, they actually do use contemporary music at some points, and that was something else that was like, oh shit, I didn't know this movie was capable of doing that. And I thought that was actually pretty good. But again, like he said, the editing is so all over the place here. It is an absolute mess, especially when we're cutting from Beverly Luff Linn to, the scenes going on with Lulu and Jemaine Clement's character, who, again, I can't remember his name because he's not a memorable character. That's simple. I can't remember his name because of that. So anytime we're cutting back to them, it just feels very inconsistent. At points, it does very much feel like two movies. But for me, the worst editing is whenever it's on Emile Hirsch's character or the scenes in the store. The scenes in the store virtually all feel the same, like we said, because of that Indian character that keeps popping up. They very much feel the same in that regard. But the thing that really does bog the movie down with the editing, like I said, is that it just isn't really consistent at all. The editing is just a complete mess in that regard. And I keep saying in that regard, but the editing is just a complete mess. And yeah, so that's definitely another huge problem with the movie.
Yeah, in terms of cinematography, like I said earlier, at least this movie does look like it has a budget. Greasy Strangler, in my opinion, looked like it had like no budget to it at all. It had some of the cheapest cinematography. Whereas with this one, the cinematography is definitely an improvement. There may be some shots where I'm like, okay, that wasn't very impressive, but I'll say for the most part, I was actually kind of impressed with the cinematography. And
Keyword kind of.
What's that?
Keyword kind of.
Yeah. I mean, when you compare to Greasy Strangler, I have to give it like that much credit. But yeah, I was kind of impressed that I'm like, okay, at least this is an improvement over Greasy Strangler. So I'll give it that. In terms of the music, the weird thing about the music for me is that it's kind of 50-50. There's times where I did actually kind of dig it. And there's other moments where I'm like, okay, I didn't really like it. But definitely, at least it's not like Greasy Strangler, like you already said, where it was just very repetitive. It's just the same score over and over, scene after scene, because that is what really got on my nerves. This one at least changed the music around. God, I can't talk right now. Even though it is like similar, like kind of music beats from Greasy Strangler, they try to change it up, and I'll definitely give them that as a pro. At least they try to change music around for whatever scene they transition to. So yeah, there's that. I'll give them that. But yeah, the editing easily is one of the worst aspects about this movie. Like I kind of just went, what am I watching? Because of how over the place the editing was. Like I already said earlier, it randomly feels the need to cut to a random sex scene that goes on for like 10 seconds, and then it cuts to like, another scene, I think like with someone at a bar or the lobby or something. So yeah, and then like with Beverly Luff Linn, when we cut to Jemaine, Clement, and Aubrey Plaza's characters, or we cut to Emile Hirsch or the thing at the store, like just the way it transitions to each scene, it does not work. They definitely need to have an editor that has a tighter editing skill to him or her, and whoever edited this film, in my opinion, just did a very poor job.
Oh, yes, I would very much agree with that. Going back what you said about that sex scene, though, I will say, once again, the movie does not feel as overly sexualized as A Greasy Strangler. Most of the characters in this movie, I know this is shocking, but they actually wear clothes.
Yeah, dude, thank you.
They're not walking around naked the whole time with their fucking dicks sticking out. They're actually wearing clothes in this movie.
Or have the characters say, "Can I watch you pee?"
Oh, yes, there's nothing like that here, thankfully. There is still some really disgusting, off-putting dialogue, but most of it is in the dialogue and not in the actual scene, so I will give it that. That being said, even though we're trying to be positive here, this is still an awful film. I'm not going to say that, oh, this is, that much an improvement, because it's really not. It's just when you compare it to The Greasy Strangler, it really is only up from there. And that really shows in this film. Like, sure, there are things that Jim Hosking does do well as a director, kind of, but for the most part, this film is still a complete mess. And look, there are going to be people out there that really love this film. I've heard people compare him to John Waters. I've heard people compare him to David Lynch. I really don't see those comparisons at all. I don't really think he exudes either style. I mean, I guess I could see John Waters more than David, but definitely not David Lynch. This guy is not David Lynch in any shape or form. There's really nothing here. I'm like, oh, there's a metaphor there. Oh, there's something deeper going on there. Like, no, there's nothing like that in this movie. It could just simply be that his movies are simply not for us. But I really do think that Jim Hosking does have a very big lack of talent here, and I think it very much does show in this film. There are actors I like here that are very much wasted, like Maria Bamford and things like that, and just overall, I really hate An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn. It's not as, unbearable as I expected it to be, but it still is an awful film in every sense of the word, and I am going to give An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn overall a D.
And for my overall thoughts, An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn is a step up from The Greasy Strangler. Yes, I do think it is. I admit that the cinematography is better. I surprisingly liked some of the music. Other times I didn't, but some of it I actually surprisingly did. Jemaine Clement is definitely the best performance. Craig Robinson, when he's not doing the grunting thing, yes, he is very good. And Aubrey Plaza, she's doing her thing. So there's definitely things to give this movie credit for sure. But it still suffers from very bad editing, confusing choices with the characters, whether you want to root for them or not. The romance is very poorly done. The dialogue is still very bad. Obviously not as bad as The Greasy Strangler, but still very bad dialogue nonetheless. The movie, it's either annoying, it's either really boring, and it's really, really boring considering it's only like an hour and a half. No, an hour 40 minutes, excuse me. It
feels like 3, but it feels like 3, but
Yeah. So I did really feel the runtime. It really does drag, in my opinion. Pretty much what Kevin said. There's a lot of characters. It just feels very pointless. It's just weird for the sake of being weird, annoying for the sake of being annoying. And whatever development Jim Hosking tried to do, it just fell completely flat. And Yeah, I really did hate this movie. I may not hate as much as Gracie Strangler, but I do still very much hate this movie. And like I said, it is still one of my least favorites of 2018. I hope Jim Hosking, like I do hope in the future, he'll make a better film than this one and Greasy Strangler. But while it is a step up, it's still a very bad movie. And I am going to give it, on my scale, 1.5 out of 4 stars, which would be a D plus on Kevin's letter grade.
All right, so I think we've pretty much covered everything. I will say this is actually not one of the worst movies I've seen this year, but that's because I've seen over 200 films, and that could very much be a reason for that. But I do want to thank 22TigerDude here. You know, we saw this film together. We got through everything together. We unfortunately had the misfortune of watching it, but I do think that it was all worth it when we did this review.
Oh, yes, I very much agree, man. Thank you very much for bringing me on. I hope I was able to bring as much as I could to this movie. I know you did most of the explaining, but I hope I was able to offer. And thank you for bringing me on to review Jim Hosking's second film.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for this video. Comment down below. Let us know what you guys thought of An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn overall. If you haven't seen it, don't. Jim Hosking is not something that I would recommend at all. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, you guys can check out Tony's channel. Done numerous collabs. I don't think I need to go over all that at this point. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.